And what's up, Utah? Welcome back to We Are the People. This is your host, Jason Preston. And it has been a wild start to November, as we all knew it was going to be. Obviously, very exciting what happened at the presidential level, at the national level. And very interesting and not surprising what happened here in Utah. But we're going to talk about that. But first, I want to ask two things. First, I want to dedicate this show to Kirk Moore. For those of you who are not aware, he has been arrested. He is being held without bail until his trial in July. Hope everyone will stand up and remember Kirk Moore, and also his son, Michael Moore, who is 17 years old and has been left now without a father while we wait till July. And more is going to be coming out this soon. So anyways, please stay tuned. Well, so a lot to talk about today. We will have a show where we're going to talk about the elections nationally, what it means. There's a lot of chaos, a lot of questions. Why did the Democratic Party step down? Why did CNN throw Kamala under the bus? Why has the Democratic Party been so civil? Things don't add up to people, and I think we all know that there's something doesn't smell right, and I think we're going to find out soon. But what I really want to get into is Utah. There's one of the most important things that came out, and I want to go ahead and check out this post from Jack Posobiec. What's going on in Utah? 49 and 50 states shift right in 2024. And this is compared to where we were in 2020. And guess what? Utah, the only state to move left. So I'm actually excited about this because, we've been screaming and shouting from the rooftops for, several years about the corruption in this state. And because of the media, because of, our politicians and even the Republican Party, they've done a very good job keeping people's head in the sand, making them think that everything's okay. But the beautiful thing about this is we're getting the national spotlight put on the state of Utah. And I think people are starting to say, well, what is going on? How is it that we're one of the only states that are moved more blue? Well, it has some people say, well, it's all the Californians moving in. Really? It's all the Californians moving in? We're the only state Californians are moving into. They're not moving into Nevada, to Texas, to all across the country. There's something more. That's a nice, simple answer that it's the Californians. This is not because of the Californians. There's something much deeper, and I would say much more serious going on, and we're going to dive into that today. But I think the next thing I want to look at, because again, Utah has come under this national spotlight in a few things. The other thing that came under the spotlight recently, just this last year, was in the change in gender dysphoria, as you see at this chart here. So as you see in the chart here, Utah had one of the highest changes in gender dysphoria in the entire country. What's going on? Is there something going on here? Or is this just a fluke? Is just the Californians moving here? Again, I would say there's something much bigger going on here than just these things. And I think we need to look at these patterns. When Utah is out of 50 of all the states, when Utah stands out as the only one or one of there's something deeper than just a coincidence. How about this? I'm sure we all remember seeing this show when Dr. Phil interviewed Trump, and they talked about all the farmland China owns. Well, one of the spots they talked specifically about was our backyard in Utah. How much land they own right in our own backyard, specifically around our military bases, around Dugway Proving Ground, around the test and training ranges. Again, this is where people have to ask themselves, is there something going on here, or is this a matter of just coincidences? Last thing I want to share is this. Again, for those who say there's nothing unique here, I want to play this reminder from John Christ.
Yo, I've been walking around Salt Lake for like an afternoon. This city literally cannot get enough of Pride Month. Just literally drinking out of a fire hose. And I was thinking to myself, has any city waved the white flag quicker and surrendered easier than Salt Lake City? Except for obviously PGA Tour surrendering to the Live Tour. Has anyone else given up without a fight quicker than Salt Lake? Used to be the capital of the LDS Church, very values-based city. You know what I'm saying? Can't buy alcohol on Sundays. The alcohol you do buy is has less alcoholic content, like a lot of rules. And just the progressive movement came in and just immediately like, we're sorry, we didn't mean to offend anyone, please do whatever you want, take our city. Like even Texas, they're like, hey, we want to wave the pride flag, and they're like, nah, we're good, we love you, but nah, I don't think so. Salt Lake City just gave up, dude.
So when you look at Utah, there's a few things that stick out to me as the biggest concerns, and the biggest concern, bar none, is our elections. You've got Deidre, who says Utah is the gold standard for elections. However, since 2020, you have other states, and I reference Florida a lot because my wife and I are from Florida, and we see the difference. There's a very huge contrast in the state there that's standing up against the woke mob, that's standing up, that's moving more and more conservative, not just to the right, but more and more conservative. And one of the biggest things, to me, one of the most important things is our elections. If we do not have free and fair and control of our elections, we don't have control of who gets in. We have politicians who refuse to pass any election integrity laws. We have representatives who are in bed with China. We're going to get into some of the issues with our representatives. And for 10 years, we the people have been shut down anytime we tried to put a grassroots candidate, someone who would stand up to the system here in Utah. For 10 years, we've not been able to get a grassroots. We have been decimated. And to me, fixing Utah starts with elections. So the first thing, we have universal mail-in voting. Almost every other red state after what happened in 2020 got rid of universal mail-in voting. Utah insists that we have to keep it. We use Dominion machines. Dominion machines, we know, was what was responsible in the fall of Venezuela. Again, red states across the country getting rid of Dominion. Utah, our representatives stand strong. They will not touch Dominion. ERIC, another system that has been identified for fraud nationally. Utah has it. Every other red state has dumped it. Utah insists that it must stay. Ranked choice voting. The National Republican Committee came out, I think it was last year, and said that every Republican state should ban ranked choice voting. Guess what? We have it in Utah. We have SB 54, which we're going to get into. SB 54 basically was implemented 10 years ago as a way to prevent grassroots candidates from ever getting back in control of this government. And another thing, it is impossible to do an audit in Utah because we are the only state that has gone through the voter record rolls and marked up to 50% of them either private or withheld. What does that mean? It means it's impossible to do an audit. So when you have every single system of fraud implemented into the state, and you have the private and withheld so that there's no way to audit it, there's a reason we're ranked in the bottom of the country for election integrity. And then I think the cherry on top with our elections, most states have a Secretary of State, and the Secretary of State is elected by we the people, and their job is to oversee elections. And if there are things we don't like the things going on in Utah, it's a real simple process. You vote them out. Well, a few years ago, Utah said, you know what, we don't want that to give the people that type of power. I mean, one of the trends you're going to notice in Utah is how much we've been moving from the people having a choice and having a central governor or the executive branch appointing people. Well, they removed our Secretary of State and they gave us a lieutenant governor. So, i.e., Deidre Henderson oversees their own elections. And this is why all this drama came up when Phil Lyman was running against them, because anytime Phil Lyman wanted to challenge something that was going on, to see the proof, to see to actually see the records, well, Deidre refused him. Why? Because she has the ability to oversee her own elections. So that's the first and biggest concern I have with Utah, that I think people need to, when we say what happened to Utah, why is Utah turning blue? The first thing is elections, because if you do not have control of your elections, you can't vote these people out. Or if it gives, look, cheating has always happened. There's never been a time in the history of this country where there has not been cheating and fraud. Kids are going to cheat in checkers and in soccer games and football games. I can promise you, when it's all the marbles, when it's elections, there is fraud, there is cheating. And the goal of election integrity is to make it as difficult as possible and easy as possible to catch it. So that's my first thing, that if we're going to understand what's going on in the state, you have to understand that. Because when you understand that, then you can look and say, okay, let's look at our politicians. They will not pass any meaningful laws on election integrity. Every time they say they're passing a bill like to protect, keep boys out of women's sports or out of women's locker rooms, there's loopholes in it that actually codify it. Every time they pass a bill that we think is one thing, we find out there's loopholes that do the exact opposite. Well, we have a problem with our legislators, and our legislators, we have a few good ones, but the problem is, if you run for office and you're going to buck the system, I can promise you, you're going to find out real fast, this, because we don't have control of our elections. Again, the grassroots has not had a single victory in 10 years. So you have the problem with our elections. You have the problem with our politicians, and then you have the Republican Party in Utah. And the Republican Party, one, has allowed themselves to be hijacked by SB 54, which again, the caucus and the convention nominate certain people, like they did Phil, to go and represent us, to put them on the ballot. SB 54 says, well, anyone who pays, like John Curtis, who was a registered Democrat all his life, says switches day of and says, I'm a Republican now. And even though he gets rejected by the delegates, he buys his way onto the ballot. Well, guess what the Republican Party does? They rubber stamp these guys. They rubber stamp Cox. Cox was shut down from the Republican Party. In other words, we have a Republican Party that has no backbone and no leadership. And even worse, what they do is every year they come and they say, oh, this year we have a new plan. And it keeps all the people who trust in the Republican Party to fix our problems, it keeps them trusting in a system that is designed to keep us failing year after year. Again, it wasn't the Republican Party that got Trump in office. It was the podcast. It was culture. It was the people that shifted. And in Utah, if we want to understand the problems of the state, we have to understand that the Republican Party has become one of those problems. Now, I want to talk about something here that I think we've talked about this before, and that is there is an organization who has made it their very clear goal to subvert this state. And we're going to read straight from this article in Brooklyn's Mountain West. I'm going to there's a link to this on our website, but they talk about the Utah model in here. You can see that highlighted. And they're talking about how Envision Utah changed the culture of the state of Utah. Because the question is, how did we get from a state that believed the Constitution was inspired by God, that said that the United Nations is planned tyranny and a satanic organization? How did we go from there to the state that's now in bed with the United Nations? Again, Utah is the only state in America the United Nations meets in besides New York. How did we go from there to there? And I think as we read this, I think you'll start to you should be asking some questions and starting to see that there's more to it than just happenstance or people moving from California. So let's come down here to the introduction. Utah may be the last place that comes to mind when one thinks about national innovation and leadership in regional planning. What is regional planning? Regional planning is not a constitutional form of government. It is a quasi-government, just like what they have in Orlando with these special districts. It is a form of political and corporations. Okay, so Utah would be the last place, let's see, that comes to mind when one thinks about national innovation and leadership in regional planning. Of course not. We believe in mayors and in representative government. As a highly conservative state, Utah boasts a staunch property rights faction, along with a true Western disdain for all things related to government control. With its strident skepticism of global climate change and jealous regard for local control of all land use decisions, it would be surprising if Utah surpassed more liberal locales in its progress on regional cooperation and its adoption of quality growth ideas, and yet that's exactly what happened. What does this mean? I just don't think people can dismiss this. I don't think we can just read by this and not ask what this is about, what they're talking about, and why it matters. As you look through this, we'll look at the second paragraph. Envision Utah adopted several strategies that have distinguished Utah's regional planning efforts from other regions and given rise to what can be called the Utah model. You'll hear politicians talk about this all the time, of collaborative planning. Envision Utah found success by not only tapping into people's shared values and aspirations, but also because of its significant public engagement, using convincing, unbiased data to demonstrate the need to work regionally and the ability to garner broad buy-in from important stakeholders in the community. As more is learned from Envision Utah's success in regional coordination, a number of takeaways appear relevant for other regions. Look at the third point. Package all proposals and principles to appeal to the values of the community. And you're going to find, especially as we talk about, Utah, and you look at BYU right now, where they're redefining the family. You had the professor tear up the Proclamation of the Family right on camera.
Evil is Kamala much better, sir? She wants to kill babies.
No, she doesn't want to kill babies.
She's pro-abortion.
Well, wait to see what happens once. Here, I'm gonna.
Did you just tear the family proclamation
in front of you? I'm tearing this,
sir,
because I think
that's modern revelation. I have that all on video.
Well, wait.
That's modern revelation, sir, from a prophet.
You're not a prophet.
I'm not a prophet, but Gordon B. Hinckley was a prophet, and this Quorum of the 12 were prophets.
We're seeing a shift in what it means to be a Christian in the state. We're seeing a shift in people from believing in freedom and defending the family and defending our rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, to a shift in valuing tolerance, belonging, and the UN sustainability goals. How about this one? The next one. Spend time initiating and maintaining the right political setup. What does that mean? Spend time initiating and maintaining the right political setup. This was written in 2012. Shortly after this was written, that is when SB 54 was passed. And from that time forward, we have completely lost control of our political process here in Utah. They have maintained the right political setup. They did initiate it, and now they are maintaining it. Who is Envision Utah? Well, you can watch the show that was just released last week with Chelsea Hope. But you can see there's powerful people here. Stuart Adams was founded by Mike Leavitt. And if you don't know who Mike Leavitt is, if people ask who's the kingpin in this state for corruption, it is Mike Leavitt. You have the president of the Utah State Senate on here. You have Scott Anderson of Zions Bank. You've got over here on the right, Keith McMullen, who is the president and CEO of Deseret Management Corporation. Who is Deseret Management Corporation? Well, it is the church's media arm. They own Deseret News, KSL, a number of our state media. You've got Tarek Miller. You got Brad Wilson, Jenny Wilson, Doug Wright from the KSL TV radio. So once they have these plans, they have all the people to push it. And again, I don't want to get into Vision Utah right now. But again, all the former governors, Spencer Cox is on there, our media outlets. But there we have done shows, and I would highly recommend you go dig into Vision Utah, because this is the organization that if you understand what the World Economic Forum is, which is a group of unelected people who are trying to change the way the world governs itself, Envision Utah is doing the same thing, but for the state of Utah. So we talked about Envision Utah. The next concern is China. We saw the map of China and all the farmland here. Well, here's an article about China. China influenced Utah legislation during a long-running campaign. China's campaign has been deemed a national security threat. In other words, someone from the AP went to the FBI in D.C. and said, we've heard that China is seeking to work not just in the national level, but more at the sub-national level, the state level. And we've heard they're having great success. Can you point us an example of where we might see this? And the FBI told this AP reporter, Sam Metz, if you want to see an example of corruption of subversion of China into another state, the best example is Utah. And he said it has actually become a national security threat. Right here, China's leader Xi Jinping said during a trip in 2015 that without success at the sub-national level, in other words, the state level, it will be very difficult to achieve practical results for the cooperation at the national level. So in other words, we are at war with China. We have the national level trying to shut them down. And what do? They try to go in the back door and work at the state level. Where they found success? They found success in Utah. An investigation by the Associated Press has found that China and its U.S.-based advocates spent years building relationships with Utah's officials and lawmakers. Those efforts have paid dividends at home and abroad. The AP found lawmakers delayed legislation Beijing didn't like, nixed resolutions that conveyed displeasure with its actions, and expressed support in ways that enhanced the Chinese government's image. Again, why is this concerning? Because we're at war with China. China, the CCP, their goal is to take this country down. And it just so happens that Utah is the gateway for China to do this. They have found more success here than any other state. Right here, the second paragraph, Beijing's success in Utah shows how pervasive and persistent China has been in trying to influence America, said Frank Montoya Jr., a retired FBI counterintelligence agent who lives in Utah. Utah is an important foothold, he said. If the Chinese can succeed in Salt Lake City, they can make it in New York and anywhere else. And I'm going to recommend this website's, this article is on our website. You can look it up online too, the Associated Press. But the AP found groups of 25 Utah lawmakers routinely took trips to China every year since 2007. Lawmakers have partially used campaign donations to pay for their trade missions and cultural exchanges while relying on China and host organizations to pay their expenses. On the trips, they forged relationships with government officials and were quoted in Chinese state-owned media in ways that support Beijing's agenda. When Trump, if you guys remember, in 2018 came and tried to turn off the money train to China and start to bring our manufacturing back, this is what our Utah representatives do. This is from Greg Hughes. He says, Utah is not like Washington, D.C. The Utah Speaker of the House, Greg Hughes, a vocal supporter of former President Trump, told the Chinese state media outlet in 2018, Utah is a friend of China and an old friend with a long history. In an interview last month, the AP, Hughes said that trips to China made him bullish about the country and prospects of improving trade. So, I mean, again, we can go on and go on, but Kurt Bramble, I mean, we can go through reps after reps of who have sold their souls to China. And I would just recommend you read this. I mean, we talk about the spies that are here. China is Utah's third largest trading partner for everything from computer projects to agriculture. How about this? Circle 4 Farms, a massive hog operation in Milford, is part of a $7.1 billion buyout that would be the largest ever Chinese takeover of a U.S. firm. Again, it's a huge concern that we have foreign people owning and controlling a significant portion of our food supply. We can see the danger there. Again, why is Utah doing this? Utah farmers exporting massive amounts of hay to China. How is China buying up farmland across America? Boom, here Utah is leading the charge. China's cattle feasting on Utah grass. It's easy to find the largest Chinese-owned hay farm in the United States. It sits 190 miles east of Salt Lake City. Why is it Utah that has the largest Chinese-owned hay farm? And again, we talked about Dr. Phil pointing out that the largest supersonic authorized restricted airspace China owns we've allowed China to buy space there. And when you go back to that Associated Press article, and you realize China has the ability to influence our legislators, now all of a sudden does it make sense why we've allowed them to buy all this land? Yes, because they own our legislators. There's articles about, Utah man faces federal charges accused of him being a spy for China and for selling classified national defense. Again, why is Utah in the news? There's 7 spy centers that they found in America. One of those happens to be in our backyard in Salt Lake City. I want to play this. This is actually from Trevor Loudon.
The man who invented this 15 minutes concept is Carlos Moreno. He's a professor at the Sorbonne, but he was also once the leader of Colombia's Marxist-Leninist terrorist group. His group attacked the Colombian parliament and 136 people died in the process. And this is the man that is, his philosophy is being applied in your area to implement these 15-minute city concepts. It's Agenda 2030. And Agenda 2030 and Agenda 2021 came out of Moscow University. That's where it came from, through the United Nations, all over the world, and it's being implemented by naive Republicans all over the country because they think, oh, this will be good for business. Let's just get everybody out of the countryside and cities and they can all eat mung beans and we can save the environment. And I'll go, here's how they tie together though. The youth wing of the Chinese Communist Party held a meeting in Beijing in June 2022. It was the World Youth Development Forum. And they had guests from all over the world, and it was all about implementing Agenda 2030. 15-minute cities were all part of this, etc. It was organized by the youth wing of the Chinese Communist Party. The organizing committee, the people who sort of put it together, included Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. The guests were all communists, young communists from all over the world. And the keynote speakers were Gutierrez of the United Nations and Klaus Schwab of the World Economic Forum. You know, they are together. They are integrated. The World Economic Forum has the job of bringing business and politicians into socialism, into the Chinese orbit.
Fascism.
Fascism. That's right. That's what the modern Chinese system is right now, where you have some private business, but the government tells you what to do with it. You know, that's Nazi Germany, Italian fascism. That's the Chinese model right now. But that is the model for the future. That's the model that Bill Gates likes. That's the model that a lot of these big American titans like because it means no competition. It means you can work together with the big centralized party to keep the peasants under control. You can live in your gated community and everybody else is expendable. So that's why you see that some big businessmen are quite happy to work with the communists.
You remember the Red Guard in China, what they did with the kids and what they did to the old.
And I appreciate Trevor Loudon, having him on the show. And one of the things he said is the World Economic Forum and the CCP, the United Nations, are all different branches of the same, or different tentacles of the same octopus. They have the same goal, which is to take this country down. And for some reason, Utah seems to be in the middle of all of their plans. And again, how do we have a governor right here, the red state governor who's not afraid to be woke? Best Life has ranked Utah second in corruption in the country. Again, people say, how can that be? How can that be? When you start to dig into Utah, you understand very quickly why this is one of the most corrupt states in the country. Again, our election integrity ranked in the bottom of the country. United Nations, we talked about United Nations. All these global, whether it's China's investment in the state, United Nations, again, the only place they meet outside of New York is Utah, in America. The World Economic Forum, they're writing articles about how Utah's leading the way on building these smart cities. People should be concerned. So when people start to ask, why Utah? Why is the United Nations so invested in Utah? Why is the World Economic Forum writing articles about Salt Lake City and the point, this 15-minute city? I'm trying to tell you, we live in a state that matters. A lot of people think Utah is just of no consequence, and I believe that you couldn't be further from the truth. This state, for whatever reason, is in the middle of everything that is happening right now across this country, from Chinese interest in taking over the state, from the United Nations and the World Economic Forum, from building these smart cities, from pushing Agenda 2030, the point. There's article after article that's written about this. And you guys saw I'm sure you guys all are familiar when we had the conversation, when I approached the governor, asked him about smart cities, and he blew up in my face and started putting pounding on my chest and literally swearing. And meanwhile, we have video of him talking about, making Utah the first, and building smart cities and making Utah the first smart state.
And allow us to continue to lead the nation in technological advancements in smart cities. And really, there's no reason we can't be the first smart state.
Again, here on the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, talking about the fourth industrial revolution. Natalie Goshner, who is a member of, here's an article she wrote in Deseret News. And again, Deseret News is their paper. And she is a member of Envision Utah. And what is she talking about? Why Utah should be the birthplace of the fourth industrial revolution. For those of you who don't know what the fourth industrial revolution is, I will tell you it should be something people should be concerned about, because this is the new world that these elite are imagining. It is a world where the internet is no longer something outside of you, but it is integrated into a chip. In fact, Elon Musk is working on that, which people should be concerned about that too. But is where the internet is now a part of you. It is the system that will allow us to integrate digital ID and have everything associated with your digital ID and your digital wallet. A lot of people say that it looks very much like the beginning of what is talked about in the book of Revelations of the mark of the beast. Whether it is or whether it isn't, what I will tell you is this: the world is on the verge of changing dramatically. We're moving more and more towards tyranny. America is in a very dangerous place, on the verge of falling, and the United Nations and these global organizations have a new vision of the world. And it is a vision of technocratic tyranny. And Utah, for some reason, is supposed to be the birthplace of this. And here we are in Utah leading the way. And then if you ever watched our shows, which I'd recommend with Chelsea, where she gets into the Internet of Things, this is part of the fourth industrial revolution. And this is straight from the websites in Utah. And again, I would just recommend you go watch the videos we've done on the fourth industrial revolution, because Chelsea did a huge deep dive on this. Again, here Utah is diving into one of the first states to push digital ID, which again, if we are moving into that direction, which China's moved, which is the social credit score, where if you jaywalk or your DEI score gets too low, they ding your ID, and your ID all of a sudden now you can't make purchases once we have digital currency, which is coming. Why is Utah piloting this stuff? Utah becomes the first state to accept mobile. I mean, again, Utah is leading the way. And I think it's just a time for people to wake up and see what is happening in our backyard. And I want to, as we wrap this up, I want to share a little reminder from James Lindsay here. And for those of you who do not know James Lindsay, he's been on Joe Rogan several times. He is an absolute rock star as far as understanding what is happening in this world. And he's been warning the country about what is happening and what is coming. And I want to share this little clip.
That's exactly what it is. So this is a state that I can tell you from every interaction I've had with a person in this state so far, every single one, is that this is a values-driven state. This is a state that's rooted in values, rooted in morals, rooted in family. It's deep, deep, deep. You can tell when you're here. I go to all the states, actually not quite. I've been to 42 of them. And there's a different vibe in every state for sure. And that is unmistakable here in Utah. And so the only way that the state could have got from there to here is if those values got turned against them and subverted like that. And it is. It's a perversion of love thy neighbor. And by the way, it's Maoist. If you don't know that this is Maoist, Mao had a formula that he used to transform China. That formula was unity, criticism, unity. We're going to start, he said, with a desire for unity. Then we'll teach people the real basis for right and wrong through criticism and struggle. So we'll tell people that they're not living up to the expectations. And then we can arrive, he said, at a new unity on a new basis. And we'll have a new unified culture under a new standard that's higher and better and whatever. And so what he would do is he would literally, if we translate that into the language of today, is he just wants to make a state where everybody feels like they're included. Just wants everybody to feel like they belong. It's very important that everybody's welcome. But the problem is, Jason, is people like you. You have attitudes that make it so some people can't feel welcome. You're systemically racist. You're systemically homophobic.
Mean is the word they use for us.
Mean yeah, you guys are mean. It's good for your brand, or whatever, as the governor said. So him. It's like the Muslim thing, like peace be upon him, but it's him for Spencer Cox. And every time you say his name. So what they've done though is there's people who in this state are a problem. They aren't welcoming. They aren't loving. They don't allow people to feel like they belong, and their values have kind of gotten in the way. So the values must have been misinterpreted. Let's give you a new interpretation of those. And inch by inch by inch by inch, the next thing you know, they flip the thing over.
I think it's very clear that this state has been subverted. You have Envision Utah literally bragging about doing it and writing articles telling other states how to do it. You've got China, who's clearly, right of their own words, in bed with this state, controlling our legislators, buying up our farmland, and influencing us in the wrong direction. We have the United Nations, for some reason, extremely interested in our backyard. We have the World Economic Forum encouraging and writing articles and talking about how we're leading the way with these technocratic smart cities. We've lost control of our elections. There is clearly a problem in this state. I believe we can win. And as we wrap up, I want to finish, just share this one. If you haven't seen the full show we did with James Lindsay, you can find it on YouTube or on Rumble. I'd encourage you to watch it because this is one of the most brilliant minds of our time. And same thing with Trevor Loudon. But we're going to wrap up. I want to play this last clip from him.
Utah. No, your state is worse than you think it is. I go around this country telling people that Utah is the fakest red state. I'll tell you, you're way too asleep. It is much worse and much more important in Utah than you know. Your politicians are not doing you right, and it's time for you to start getting really clear. And it's time to speak up, time to get organized, get smart, understand the issues, and get off the couch and show up. And then don't get discouraged. Don't quit. They're going to come after you. They're not going to like it. They're not going to give you an inch of ground back. So don't quit. They're going to make you feel like, oh, well, I can't do anything about it. No, you've got to do something about it. Talking about our kids, we're talking about your grandkids, you're talking about the future of the country, you're talking about watching them fall into possibly permanent digital slavery, which I can't imagine anybody wanting. And Utah happens to be, very unfortunately, for whatever set of reasons, the place where it's supposed to start. So a lot falls on you. A lot is asked of you. But I also think, having met many of you now and seen what you're made of here, I think you're actually there for the challenge.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with him more. For whatever reason, this is ground zero. This is the heart of the battle for freedom. And the neat thing is, I do believe the Constitution will be saved, and I believe God is in control, and I believe God will win. And if the corruption is here, that means the light is here too. That means the light, and there's both light and darkness here. Some of the greatest light and some of the greatest darkness, and the darkness is very real. But I do believe, just like James Lindsay, he spent a lot of time here in Utah, and there are incredible people. It's you guys. And you are the ones who are going to stop this. You are the ones who are going to take this state back and protect our freedoms for our children. It is going to be us. It will not be our politicians. And the way we can win this fight is to stop being afraid to speak the truth. Share this information. Talk to your neighbors about the relationship with China. Get that Associated Press article about China. Get the information about the smart cities. Start talking to your neighbors. Talk to your neighbors about Cox. No one likes him. I am telling you, I talk to people all the time. He is not liked. And the more people talk about and call him out on social media, the more people call out the lie, that is when we win. We lose when we remain silent, because silence in the face of evil is evil itself. We cannot allow what's going on in our schools. We cannot allow what's going on at BYU, where you've got them pushing Marxism on our kids. We have to take a stance, and what we do know is we can win. We will win. This is God's war. This is God's plan. He wins. The only question is, what will our role be in doing that? And I encourage you to, first, thank you for watching and supporting. And any support you have, again, you've noticed our shows are down. So it's simply a matter of financing. If we have funding, we have the shows. If we don't have funding, we can't put the shows on. But we appreciate your support. But the most important thing you can do is talk to your neighbors, share information with them. Let's make this widespread. Let's make it vocal of who we are and what we stand for and what we stand against. So thank you guys for your support. God bless you guys, and God bless Utah.